I'll give us a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon and welcome to the COVID-19 Financial Oversight Committee. It is April 10th and we are going to go just a little bit out of order on the agenda as we wait for a couple of our other committee members to arrive before we do anything with a vote. But the second item on the agenda for today is a review of allocations and expenditures. So as of, well, not last council meeting, but the one before it, all of the funds have been allocated. So $259,810,600. It has all been allocated and approved by council. And so we're now moving into kind of that second phase of just more continuous monitoring of the spending. And also, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, we're getting requests for reallocations. So somebody who received funding is saying, I'm not going to spend it all, you know, with the way that I originally presented, but I would like to continue to spend it in a different format, or a different use of funds. So we'll talk about the future reallocations, but at this point, everything is allocated. So what was sent out, what you have is the original amount that was allocated. Column-wise, then you have what was spent in this current period, which is the month of March. But you have the year-to-date total expenditures in that third column over, which is what leaves the variance on the far right column. So in total, we have the 259, almost 260 million allocated, with 125,795,000 spent. So we're almost halfway in the spending. And one of the things to note, if they are grant contracts, so wherever you see a nonprofit, that will represent the amount of funding that we have sent to them. That does not mean they have spent all of those dollars. So what we're doing with those grant contracts is monitoring the spending, trying to stay ahead of them going into like a negative cash flow with the grant, but we didn't want to front all of the money in case they didn't need it all. And then we're not playing this exchange of getting funds back at the end of the grant contract. And so primarily what we've been doing the last few months or the last few meetings is looking at requests to extend the grant contracts. And so we have 2 that we'll come to later when we have our quorum. But the expenditures that you see for our departments represent the actual expenditures to date. If it is a nonprofit, it is what we have sent them. And we will continue to send this to the committee, I think, just monthly, whether we're meeting or not, and you can keep a track of, you know, who's spending what, and then if you have questions, we can tee those questions up for a future meeting for discussion. I don't know if you have any at this point now. Yep.
Have we received any information about the Community Safety Partnership Fund? I see there's still $1 million left.
We have, so in the change of administration, Ron Johnson, I was like, that's not the right name. Ron Johnson is at the health department now, still doing the funds. Has he left health? Mm-hmm. Okay. So our last communication was with Ron while he was at health department. So I'll make a note of that.
Can we get an update from MDHA? I think theirs are the biggest amounts.
Yes, and they are progressing with the infrastructure work. We just did another payment to them. Okay. So one of the things that we do is we have roughly monthly, if not minimum quarterly, conversations with the departments, but especially now that we've been doing more monitoring than allocating, we really do reach out to them and say, do you think you're going to have all your funds spent by, 12/31/26? We'll also, like we haven't had any requests of payments or we haven't seen any activity, and we find out why. And so that works for the most part. And then we get quarterly reports from them where they write down and tell us, there's a series of questions that they have to respond about meeting targets. If they're serving individuals, give us the demographics and numbers and things like that. But like in this case, it's more of a construction project. Same with like 50 Forward construction project.
Right.
How's that going?
Same
that
thing
type of
for, well, I guess, R232146 on the second page, that big chunk, that's
The 10 mil, participatory budgeting.
Okay.
Yes.
okay.
So the 10 million that you see is participatory budgeting. The 571,000 was the administrative expenses. They had actually been allocated 700, they didn't use it all. We knew that, so we actually used the leftover funds to fund more projects. We've allocated the full 10 million, I think all but maybe 15,000.
Okay,
To
and that
go for
allocation
overrun.
just happened?
Yep, that just, really, I think the departments had the green light March 1st essentially, and so they've all started kind of working on getting those projects executed.
Okay, and then the Nashville State Community College and the
Good question.
Urban League, like, there's a.
Did you get a request from them to extend?
We have a request, no, their contracts actually expire October.
Okay.
So I anticipate we will absolutely get a request for an extension for Nashville State and Urban League. Nashville State has a request to update their grant spending plan to allocate more money into the mobile classroom and less from salaries. And so we actually have a call set up either Friday or Monday to discuss that. Their total allocation was 2.3, you might see it on here, I think 2.2. And I think that they're getting ready to make that investment in the mobile classroom, which will be almost $1 million. So I think they will complete their spending, but we're also setting up a call with Urban League because we haven't had much spending from them either. So there's a couple that I don't know that even extending the contract
Will be enough.
Will be
time
enough.
To spend all the money.
Yeah.
Fuse Corp.
That is finished, so that balance,
12,426.
is probably, left over to be accumulated. And that, we're getting to where some of the departments now have had the funds and have completed projects. And something like 12,000, they're just kind of throwing back into the kitty, as I'll say. But then we had one that you'll be hearing about once they have a more specific plan. But there was a, from our Economic and Community Development team, there was a market value analysis that was, I believe, 350,000, and they have 205 left over. So now Jamari Brown, our director of ECD, would like to use that 205 for some other small business initiatives. So that's, I'm kind of leaking into that last item, which is that reallocation to where when there, what I would say is if there's a department that was, and I'm using department, but if there was, you're good. If there is a department that was allocated funds, they're looking to redeploy them within what I would say is that same ballpark of intended use. And I think that makes good sense rather than just starting over. I think that we as a committee and the council approved a general use of those, it wasn't general, it's a very specific use of funds under that general. So you'll get affordable housing. If they have leftover funds, they want to use it again in affordable housing. They might not use it as they originally requested. So they will have to come back to this committee and to council to reappropriate the use of those funds, but the idea of keeping them within the ballpark of the original intended use.
Is this the 25 million?
No, we're not talking anything specific yet. We're just kind of talking about reallocations in general,
Oh, gotcha.
That's leverage.
because there've been,
We already moved 10 million, didn't we, from the 50 million of the
To address
homeless.
homelessness.
We moved 50 million, 10 million into the Barnes.
It was a
Fund.
little bit less, I think it was like 7.
Yeah.
Okay,
7.
so we moved that already.
Yep.
Can I ask, oh, you had a question, Sean.
Oh, go ahead.
You sure?
Oh, wait, yeah.
The music venue study, when are we gonna see, like, it, or
I know
some of these studies that we've funded?
So I know they completed that and they had a little bit left over and wanted to add on to it. So they were doing an amendment to the contract to spend the full amount and add on a second piece of the study.
Okay.
But they completed the first one.
But I'm taking all the ones that you're asking about and we'll make sure we have specific.
It's interesting with that state bill. That's right.
We're going about roughly $130 million to go. Some of that's already been exhausted, right, because the reporting period is X. The next, I don't want to say expiration date, but deadline to use it is June 30th for a pretty big portion. And then some have extended through October. And then,
Well, so with departments and a lot of what I call it internal spending, it's really investments in the community, but a lot of those didn't have dates. So
okay.
they just have to spend it by 12/31/26, which is the
Got it.
deadline for the use of ARPA funds.
So of that 130, how much falls into that roughly? It's the chunk of it. I mean, it's,
I'll have to get you an updated amount on that. We looked at the amount that was allocated, what I would say, under contract. So if it's under contract, it is with a nonprofit that, that we've sent grant funds to, or that we're,
right.
partnering in grant funds. And I think of the 260 million, I think the number that wasn't either wasn't yet spent or wasn't under contract was about 75 million.
Okay.
So the internal, that could go the all the way to 12/31/26. We originally did not have grant contracts going past like September 30th of 24.
Right, so we'd have the
So that
runway.
because the next kind of deadline date that we're really working against is 12/31/24 is the last date for obligation. So all funds have to be obligated by 12/31/24. And that was kind of the next big deadline, because if we had any inkling that there were funds that were awarded that weren't going to be spent by 12/31/26, we can't really find out, October of 26 that they're not gonna be spent because we don't have a way to reobligate them.
Right.
So that's kind of the key date why we're pushing so hard on this monitoring, is that if anybody thinks that they're gonna have funds not spent by 12/31/26, we actually have to identify that now. And that's whether it's under contract or internal. One of the things that I brought to the committee's attention at the last meeting, and maybe 2 meetings ago, but was that we were concerned with an update that the US Treasury had sent out where they had, it was called the IFR, the interim final rule. And
Interim final?
yeah, there's an oxymoron for you, right?
Yeah.
And the question ended up getting brought up about the definition of obligation. And we had already sought out external counsel that agreed with the fact that we were going through our normal course of business with council approving that legislation would suffice as documentation of obligation. And that IFR came back and said no. And that really threw us a curveball and just doesn't seem quite right. There were lots of letters sent to Treasury for the comment period. Actually, US Treasury reached out to us and said, would you take our call and tell us what you think about that? We very nicely said we have no idea why legislation does not represent documentation of obligation. So a week ago, so 2 weeks this Friday, late in the day, they came out with a new update. It's not a change to the IFR, but it's a new FAQ that says they will accept interagency agreements.
Good.
So, you know, in theory, Metro can't do an agreement with itself. Like, we do it with component units and we do it with other partner, but, so this was good. So it's going to create a whole, it's like we're gonna duplicate efforts, but we will be able to, as it gets closer, be able to do agreements with, you know, Office of Family Safety to say, you have $46,000 left to spend and this is how you are spending it, and we can sign that agreement and say that. We can do that with MDHA. Now, we could do a contract with MDHA, but now that they're letting us do these interdepartment, we will go ahead and with MDHA say, you have this much left to spend. So that's number 3. That is the update for the definition of obligation, that's now working in our favor. So we crossed that hurdle. So we're not concerned now about departments not having something to represent their obligation that we've made to them. So they can continue to spend the funds, but everybody has to spend through 12/31/26. So, like I said, I will continue to send this on a monthly basis, just via email to the committee. And then if there are questions, we'll discuss them at an upcoming meeting so that that's all on public record. But so that you have them from a monitoring perspective or any questions, and know that we continue to have monthly and quarterly meetings with both nonprofit partners and the departments, really pushing on that spend. And then as it gets closer, I don't want to go ahead and do an interagency agreement, you know, next month with a department that then spends everything by November, because then I didn't need that agreement. So we'll wait until we get closer to the end of the calendar year and do those agreements.
Can I ask, MAC Child Care Center, that one went over?
We noticed their encumbrances, so if you look, I know the headers didn't carry over, but the 4th column is an encumbrance, and it's possible that they paid their invoices without canceling out the encumbrance, because I think once you take out the encumbrance, they're not over. But we did notice that when we were looking at this for 331. That was one of the big questions we had.
And the ARP age in place, but that's a part of the, what is it? Planning Commission.
Sounds, I think that was part of the affordable housing,
Oh, okay.
I think. I have to double
I
check
think
that.
so.
Part of that 50 million, right? It was the initiative for, yeah.
Yeah, and can we get updates from them, right, like, last page, all of the interim gap housing, the low barrier housing, all of that.
Yeah.
They told us at one of the council meetings that they expect to have all of that spent. I just would like to see those reports more frequently, since I mean, they are one of the groups we gave the largest amount
Yep.
to.
And we will have some updates with some of the interim gap housing, that piece, that 9 million, and the one below it, low barrier housing. We'll have some updates probably at our next meeting with that for some reallocations. Any other questions? And then do you want, and I'll ask, do you want them to come to a meeting, or do you want their monthly report that they put together?
It'd be great to have them here, because if they're gonna be returning a lot of this money, then
Well,
what's gonna happen with the?
April will come, there's actually a request that I think you all will be really pleased with, but April will be here at the next meeting, we just have to set that date.
Okay.
This meeting was a little too soon. April and both E&G were out of town.
Okay.
But they've been working together. Okay. So, again, I apologize, I don't know if you grabbed that. We have 2 contract extension requests. The first is Rafah Institute. So they had received their contract. Again, they were working somewhat, I say in partnership, but they were separate contracts. United Way was focusing on the child care centers, and then Rafa was focusing on in-home childcare. And so one of the original, well, there were two components of Rafa's work, which was to establish some licensed in-home care, and then also to just improve some of the other, we'll call it friends and family, where they weren't going to be licensed, but it was friends and family taking care of other kids, and how could we still improve the quality of that care and safety. And one of the hurdles that they've really encountered is a lot of the licensed care that they wanted to provide in the lower income areas. If you are in MDHA housing, they could not be licensed to run a business. And so that was the biggest hurdles that they couldn't get that licensing. They're still working on that with MDHA, but they've really had to focus more on the friends and family. And so they did have this request, and that's, again, we've been spending a lot of time in conversation to make sure that they're at least getting close to their targets. Whenever we've had somebody request for an extension, if the extension, if they're very close to hitting their targets and they just need more time, we want that. We want them to hit their targets. That's the most important thing. So we've said yes, an extension makes sense. We've also had folks that have already hit their targets, but they still have leftover funds. Well, if they can serve more than the target, great. So we've said that those are good extensions of funds. So we have had a lot of conversations with Travis and his team, and they are close to hitting all of their targets. So by extending the use of the funds, they will probably end up exceeding their targets, other than just that kind of swap between licensed and what we're calling kind of the friends and family in-home. So their original contract extension is 6/30/24, and they are requesting that we extend it 1 year. He doesn't know if he needs the full year, but he'd like to just go ahead and extend it 1 year to 6/30/25. That's consistent with what we've been providing other nonprofits in their extensions. I guess we can't vote till Sean comes back.
No.
So we'll talk about.
There we go. You wanna vote now?
Are there any questions?
Second.
To approve, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we will do a contract extension that will go before council. Would one of our council members? Okay. Gamble.
Jennifer will carry it. I'm good as I not.
Yep, all
Okay.
three of us,
So
yeah.
all three, but we'll have lead as Councilwoman Gamble. And then FOAD, they're mostly in, the $75,000 grant we gave to VOAD is a great operational support. They will then deliver, they'll be able to do more planning and capacity building for the next disaster response. Tina Dinninger was the chair at the time. I'm not 100% sure she is still the chair, but I was having a conversation with Lori Shinton from Hands on Nashville, and she said we're really close to spending all the funds. She said if we could extend it to 12/31/24, then I know for sure.
Yeah.
It might be spent by 6/30. This is our time-wise, this is the last time for us to really make sure that that contract doesn't expire, and then we have to just a
Yeah.
little more tedious process.
It's so important, and unfortunately, just recently, we've learned how important being prepared and having that
Yeah.
is. So I'll move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye. Can I be late on that, please, Ms. Mel?
Were there additional sponsors too?
So yeah, I'll sign them.
I'll sign them.
Okay, thank you. So those were the two. I knew that would be quick. They were time kind of sensitive with the June 30 expirations on those. So the other ones that we have 3 more that are expiring September 30th, and then we have 2 that are 10/31. It's Nashville Food Project, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and our house, our place.
Our place.
Our place.
Oh, they haven't expended?
Well, I don't think they're gonna have to extend. I think they're gonna have their funds
Oh,
all
good.
spent.
Okay.
But those are the ones that are expiring on September 30th. And then back to what we were saying, Urban League and Nashville State expire on 10/31. Everybody else has already extended or spent under the original contract. So we will probably have some contract extensions with those coming up. They're just not as time sensitive because of the dates. And then I was explaining the other thing that will be happening is some of these reallocations. So we will have some requests from departments to come and say, well, I was gonna be spending these funds, you know, some of them we talked about, some of the low gap, the gap financing or low income housing. They wanna keep it in those same kind of areas of work, but they've either extended, they've either exhausted what they need it for, or they just weren't able to spend it all, and so they're saying, let's reallocate, but within the same components. So, but they're different than what was approved via the legislation, so they still have to come back to the committee as well as, then it would go to council.
Can you list those again? It was Big Brothers Big Sisters, Our Place.
Big Brothers Big Sisters, Our Place, and the Nashville Food Project will all expire on September 30th.
10/31
And then 10/31 is Nashville State and Urban League.
I'm wondering in the set of, or when you say come back to the committee, are you saying like physically come back in front of a committee, or?
I think with some of them, we'd want them to come explain it. And a lot of that is gonna be with planning and Office of Homeless Services. And I expect them to be coming at our next meeting, which might be helpful to set, or if you just dates to avoid. But I think in those cases, we'd have them physically come in. We would like the next one to be able to hit, so if we have to meet before it can hit a June agenda, but we do need one of them likely to come before council in June, which means we should meet in May. So are there any dates to avoid?
I would look at the budget calendar, cause that just came, well,
I
it's
have
been
it.
out for, you do, okay, yeah.
I've got that.
Other than that, I mean,
I'll be out of town that probably,
I thought you were gonna say the month, I was like, I'm
And I was so
Can we go where? No, that's all good.
the very end of May, that last week.
If we still look at Wednesdays, we have the 8th, well, we have the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th. Before we get into the holidays.
Yeah, what about the 22nd?
It's fine. It's the day after the council meeting, but.
I have to look and, I usually try to do these meetings not on a council week.
Yeah.
I'll just stay here all day.
Did you say your
I think it's
15th or 22nd?
Yeah. either one.
I think those will probably be the dates, 15th or 22nd, if we stick with the Wednesday. Okay. Let me look at the legislative filing deadline, because the 22nd might be too late. Short and sweet, sorry for all the hustle to get here. But I think that concludes, unless anybody has any other questions. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Guys?